English. And we interviewing today Mr. Matsdorf, Wulf Matsdorf. And Dr. Matsdorf will give us, first of all, a short bio of himself. Please, Dr. Matsdorf, proceed.
I'm a native of Berlin. I am now almost 74 years old. I went to school in Berlin, and when I was about early adolescent, I joined the Jewish youth movement, the Deutsch-Jüdische Jugendgemeinschaft, and this had a very strong influence on me. My parents, particularly my father, was very conservative, and he didn't want to hear anything about politics, and I had, of course, my schooling in Hebrew preparation for bar mitzvah, but as far as otherwise Jewish things are concerned, on.
Please go ahead.
I really got my first important contacts with Jewish living through Jewish youth movement. In fact, I was also connected at the time, as we belonged to a temple with the Eli, which was a Jewish liberal youth movement, and there was a very dynamic leader. His name was Ernst Heinrich Seligsohn, who, by the way, lives in Tel Aviv. He had also a very strong influence on me, but particularly the leader of the Deutsch-Jüdische Jugendgemeinschaft, Ludwig Tietz, influenced me to take part in communal affairs.
When did it happen?
This happened, I would say, roughly around 1930, 1931, and 1932. I have one very vivid recollection. There, the Gemeindevertretung in Berlin was under very conservative management of people who were the leader in industry, directors of banks, etc., and what they wanted really influenced the decision of the community. And there were some elections, and our group under Ludwig Tietz, we put up a special list in order to topple this leadership. However, it was a terrible fiasco, and we didn't succeed. And the reason why I mention this was just a very short time before Hitler came to power. My guess would be 31 or 32, but then January 1933 occurred, and suddenly all these leaders, or most of these leaders, disappeared. Now, at that time, I was a young student. I studied law, and I worked at the, I finished with the university, but I was in the so-called practical training lawyer, and I was in the last stage of the practical training at the Kammergericht in Berlin. Kammergericht was the highest court in the state of Prussia. And I remember I was under the supervision of a very distinguished Jewish Kammergerichtsrat, and he, of course, was very critical in whatever I did. But then suddenly, on the 30th of January 1933, out of the blue, this Jewish Kammergerichtsrat and myself and all the other Jews in the court were thrown out. Just make it stop a minute, yeah? Now, I had, in connection with the youth movement, we had contact with the a Jewish organization called Zentralverein. It was originally called Zentralverein Deutscher Staatsbürger Jüdischen Glaubens, but it was changed after Hitler to Jüdischer Zentralverein. And our main concern was a kind of a Jewish first aid, because after Hitler came to power, a lot of us were arrested and subjected to quite unpleasant treatment by brown shirts as R and black shirts as S. And as I had been, as I had to interrupt, or had to finish, so to speak, my legal training at the Kammergerichtsrat, I went to the office of the Zentralverein, see what we could do to help there. And I was at that time young, and I wasn't married, so really I felt, well, my friends too, it was just for a short period, so we think we could change or help those people who were in trouble. I remember one of the persons whom we helped was at that time Deputy Polizeipresident of Berlin, Weiss, Bernhard Weiss, called by the Nazis Isidor Weiss, and he was very much in danger, and his family. And I was...
he was not Jewish?
Sure.
He was Jewish?
Yes. Didn't I say this?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the Deputy Vice President, Police President of Berlin was Bernhard Weiss, called by the Nazi Isidor Weiss, and he and his family was very much endangered. So we had a kind of our Jewish group, we helped them to come over the border. It must be remembered that the Hitler movement started in Prussia, and at that time the Bavaria was not under Hitler influence yet. And Bernhard Weiss is just one example, but the other example, which probably is the more interesting, is the Zentralverein had an enormous archive of all the Nazis. And if at that time it would have immediately come out, it would have been a disaster politically and physically speaking. It may have led to really still worse things than did happen. So there was a non-Jew in charge of this archive, the Nazi archive, and I remember very vividly the name of the Christian member, I think, was Gissing, and everything... Gissing, yes.
Please spell it.
Gissing. This is my recollection. Everything possible had to be done to get the archives out of Berlin. So I went with Gissing in a plane to Munich, and from there he went with the archive to Vienna, and then they went somewhere else. And the reason why I mention this particular now is this became the nucleus of the Wiener Library, because this stuff was sent from there to Amsterdam, where at that time Dr. Alfred Wiener, who by the way was a former syndicus of the Zentralverein, established his first Wiener Library, which came later to London, and now it is of course in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Another question, please, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah?
You said that you were under influence of Ludwig Tietz and his youth movement.
Mm-hmm.
What was the ideology of this youth movement?
Well, the ideology of this youth movement was, to express this very plainly, to make young people conscious of being a Jew. Not just to see, as we used to have it, that you go occasionally to a synagogue, or that you, well, by and large, the middle class Jewish youth at that time in Germany, or in Berlin particularly, I think had Judaism very much on the periphery. And we were not Zionists. And some of the more active Jewish youth either joined political movements, for example, the Reichsbanner. The Reichsbanner, which was the activist wing of the Social Democrats, anti-Nazis, had quite a number of Jewish members and Jewish leaders. And within the Jewish community, the non-Zionist groups assembled around the Deutsch-Jüdische Jugendgemeinschaft. In retrospective now, I would say, as my father would have never permitted me to join a Zionist organization, and I was a good boy, I didn't want to revolt against my parents, I joined this Jewish youth movement, which was positive Jewish without being Zionist. You know?
But it was not anti-Zionist.
Well,
or would you say it was anti-Zionist?
Oh, definitely not. Oh, no, definitely not anti-Zionist. See, there were anti-Zionist movements like the one around the Naumann Naumann movement and people who really rejected Palestine at the time. No, the question of Eretz Israel did not play the prime part. It was more the first stage to sort of awake consciousness, the importance of being Jewish.
But it was before Hitler's rise to power.
No. This started there. You know, I would say this was in the late 20s, early 30s. You know, yes. And you know, one thing was sure. The Zionist youth in Berlin, particularly, they were in a way what we would call today militant. You know, and I think for me. It would have meant a breach with my family. So Ludwig Tietz, by the way, he came from a very well-known Jewish family, Tietz family, who had department stores and all this. So in the eyes of my parents, it was very legitimate, almost desirable to be associated with someone who has the name of Tietz, you know. So I say this all in retrospective now,
yes,
because I mean it wasn't done necessarily on a conscious level.
This movement you mentioned had a certain contact with so-called BDJJ.
This is the same.
This is the same
Bund
movement.
Deutsche Jugend. Look, I tell you.
Deutsch-Jüdische Jugend.
Yeah, Bund Deutsche Jugend. In fact, I had a wonderful reunion now at the World Gathering of Holocaust survivors, because Norbert Wollheim, who is one of the leaders of Bergen-Belsen, he was a member there. And I mean, we are all over the world. There are some of us. Members of the of this particular group. In fact, there's a nucleus of them who later on joined with Hermann Gerson, the Werkleute, an Hazorea. And the editor of this is Gustav Horn. And he's the editor of this book on Ludwig Tietz. And he was there. And there are at least half a dozen people in Hazorea today. We all belong to this group.
But there was a certain clash sometimes between the so-called BDJJ or between the IPD, the Zionist IPD.
Yes, well, I have no recollection really, you know, but also in retrospective, I would say, not on my level at that time because I was too young, but Ludwig Tietz and his groups. There was, for example, a man with the name of Dr. Hermann Berlak, who was a later son.
What's the name? Berlak?
Berlak, B-E-R-L-A-K, who later on became the son-in-law of Rabbi Leo Beek. He lived in London, died there. But at that time, the Jewish Agency was reconstructing Zionists and non-Zionists, and out of the leadership of our group came a pretty large representation of the non-Zionist group in the then reformed Jewish Agency. I think it may have been 1932, I'm not so sure.
The Jewish Agency was reconstructed in 1929.
Well, was it at the time when they had this Zionist and non-Zionist?
The non-Zionist and Zionist really united 1929 in Zurich under the leadership of Louis Marshall, the American Jewish leader, and a certain kind of non-Zionist German group under Mr. Stern. Stern.
Which Stern?
I don't remember his Stern.
No,
Joined this group.
No. This was very important. Mm. You know, it was important because in retrospective.
What was important?
That the
Jewish Agency.
That there was a liaison between this part of a positive Jewish thinking group, which was not part of the organized Zionist movement, to have a foothold in the contact with the Jewish Agency of the time.
I understand.
Because it went further. See, still running? Yeah. 1933, after Hitler came to power immediately, I don't know how much you want details. I could tell you quite a lot of stories, what we did at the time to help people to get out of this. But one of the major efforts, I remember, was that Ludwig Tietz went to England, to London, to establish contact with English Jewry and British Jewry, and for this matter also with the British government, because nobody outside Germany had a real concept what was going on inside Germany. See, it was such a it was of such a dimensions that the people outside Germany really couldn't comprehend, and for that matter, the people inside Germany, the Jews, didn't comprehend this. And so Ludwig Tietz went to London and did their very important negotiations with quite a number of prominent Jews like Norman Bentwich, Perlzweig, Morris Perlzweig. Of non-Jewish names, I remember there was one Butler, Lord Butler. He became later on a member of the British government, and he was able to alert the people about the difficulties. One of the other highlights which really stay in my memory was the 1st of April 1933. It was a boycott day. I had, because I had a kind of legal training, I was in charge of a section of the Zentralverein which helped or tried to help people to get out of Germany. Was quite an important function, because if people had to flee because of physical threat, of course they couldn't take things along by and large, but there were quite a number of them who tried to get out, had possibly some money, and my position in the Zentralverein, where I worked in full time because I had no other work, was that I helped the Jewish employees of former Jewish firms to gain some compensation, so that at least they had some capital in their hand. There was, for example, a firm called Rosenheim Grünfeld, some major...
In Berlin still? In
Berlin, yes, firms. And one thing I will never forget, I wouldn't say basically that I'm a very courageous person, but I didn't care at the time. And so I went on the 1st of April 1933 in the Braun House in Berlin. We saw, as an official Jewish delegation, the leader of the boycott committee, and we demanded some compensation for the Jewish employees. I don't know what impact this had. One thing was positive, that we were not all arrested was really a surprise. But you know, we had this feeling we had to do it. You know, so amongst the people who was in our little delegation was a man with the name of Dr. Leon Zeitlin, Z-E-I-T-L-I-N. It may be in your records one way or the other. He was a member of the Preußischen Landestag, and he was a leader, industry, and myself. In fact, the whole story is also written up somewhere. And I remember quite distinctly that we were able to get out of the funds of the Jewish firms, which were confiscated by the Nazi, a certain amount which were used by the former Jewish employees so that they could prepare the immigration. So then times went on, and the Zentralverein, which had done quite a lot of anti-Nazi work, was really in the fireline of the Nazis. And one of the most outspoken secretaries or directors was a man with the name of Dr. Martin Marx in Frankfurt. And he was...
Excuse me, I want to stop you one minute. You said that Zentralverein did a lot of anti-Nazi work.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of anti-Nazi work would you think about? What?
Well, look, to start with, if there were any excesses against Jews, there thought to it that the police followed the matter up. It came to the courts. They had a kind of they were vigilant, you know. They watched activities of the Nazis who were at that time, of course, illegal.
When? Before Hitler came?
Before Hitler, yes.
You're talking about the time before Hitler came to power?
Yes. No, I just mentioned in the connection that the name of the Zentralverein was Ogu in the name of the in the minds of the Nazis, who knew very well that the Zentralverein had opposed them in every way. For example, also a lot of the leaders of the various Ortsgruppen Zentralverein were lawyers, and they were all everywhere in close contact with the police. So the Zentralverein was a kind of a watchdog, you know, and a lot of sentences against Nazis were initiated by the Zentralverein. So coming back to the Hitler period.
But these activities they did continue after Hitler came to power?
Look, by no means.
I understand that as long as Hitler was not in power, those activities of the CV were more or less legal.
Well, in the eyes of the law of the day, they were
in the eyes of the Weimar regime.
Yeah.
But when Hitler came to power,
it was discontinued immediately. Had to discontinue.
And the Zentralverein was not involved in clandestine activities or.
Well, look, I put it to you this way. For example, take a man like Dr. Wiener, who was a political figure. It was no overt after Hitler. It was no overt anti-Semitic movement, anti-Nazi movement possible. But I remember very clearly something which in retrospect looks very naive. When after Hitler came to power, they wanted to introduce laws against Shechita in Germany, Dr. Wiener and other people from the Zentralverein went to the Reichstag. I remember there was a Dr. Bell and all sorts of Catholics, the Centro Party, which was Catholics, Social Democrats. They tried to influence them not to let the anti-Shechita legislation pass. I mean, in retrospect, this was utterly naive, but from the point of view of Zentralverein, they used this political influence, which...
This was only 33, because later there were no parties in Germany.
Well, of course. And there were no Zentralverein too, you know. The Zentralverein finished in Germany, my guess is about 1935 or something like this. But they tried to exert their political influence, and people in Zentralverein had a lot of influence also in conservative, non-Nazi conservative elements in the Catholic groups, etc. And they tried what they could to stem the tide of Nazism. Of course, it was too late, and the means were completely inadequate, of course. But coming back to my own experience, I went to Frankfurt.
How did you went to how did you go to Frankfurt suddenly?
Well, I'm just going to say, the director, Dr. Martin Marx, he was arrested, and he was charged with crimes which he had committed, so-called crimes he had committed while he was a director. And
When he was a director?
While he was before 33, you know.
A director of the CV?
Yes, in Frankfurt he was this, and then after 33 he was arrested, and I was sent to Frankfurt because there was nobody in Frankfurt to take care of the CV. Apart from the fact that Marx had his own family there were two girls in the office, and it was a going concern, you know. So I was sent there to take charge of this office, this particular office in Frankfurt. And this was a very, very interesting, so very depressing time from the Jewish point of view, because in the first place, of course, we had to take care of all the physical victims of the persecution. In Frankfurt and in the surrounding districts. My area was the province Hessen-Nassau and then the state of Hessen. And there were very, very unfortunate experiences, Jews who were molested and exposed to all sorts of difficulties, partly in connection with the fact there were very Orthodox Jews, and they tried to bribe some of the Nazis to carry on Shechita for them because they wanted to eat kosher meat. And I'm told if from the Jewish point of view, illegally killed meat can never be kosher, but this is probably a Talmudic halachic question, you know. But the result, of course, was if you bribe the Nazis, you know, you put yourself in a difficult position, and out of this, a lot of Jews in the country towns particularly had a lot of difficulties. I remember a few cases in the Taunus, which is not far from Frankfurt, where Jews were arrested before they had, you know, they had together with the Nazis killed.
In Taunus Mountains, yeah. The Mount of Taunus.
Yeah. Now, then there was the court case against Martin Marx, and by the way, I can show you later on, the whole thing has been written up in a German book just published now. I'll show it to you in a minute. Or you want to stop now, then I'll show you the books, because, just a minute,
You continue, please.
Now, I stayed in Frankfurt from autumn, around Rosh Hashanah 33, till Pesach 1938. During that time, I tried my best to continue the running of the office of Zentralverein, which was primarily concerned with what we describe as Rechtsschutz for the Jews who wanted to immigrate. And we were at that time optimistic enough that we could keep up a nucleus of some Jewish Gemeindeleben in Berlin. I belonged...
Berlin or in Frankfurt?
I'm sorry, in Frankfurt. For example, I belonged to the board of the Jüdischen Kulturbund Rhein-Main. There was a beautiful orchestra conducted by Hans-Wilhelm Steinberg, and the facts were that the standard was extraordinarily good, though of course we were always under the cloud of the daily occurrence against Jews under the Nazis. By the way, some of the members of this Kulturbund orchestra, in fact, what I'm going to say led to the final, partly to the final dissolution of the orchestra, was the fact that the better players were able to go to Palestine and become members of the nucleus of the Palestine Symphony Orchestra, which was formed at the time by Huberman, I think, or Huberman had a leading role in this. However,
excuse me, what did you read when this orchestra was working or established, and people were immigrating?
Well,
what was your attitude? You were supporting the immigrants, or did you really think that immigrants?
Both at the same time. Now, in the first place, Frankfurt was a growing Jewish community because the Jews of the country communities moved to Frankfurt. They were not secure anymore to live in the country places, and so they moved to Frankfurt. So the Frankfurt community was a growing community to start with. In addition to this, the emigration wasn't something which could be expedited because it was depending on a lot of technical things, that people were able to leave, that they could get tickets, that they got visas, the money played a role. So there were thousands of Jews in Frankfurt, and the more the pressure from outside came, the more it seemed to us important, and the Zentralverein played a role in this, to keep up, so to speak, the morale. And the orchestra was part of it. There were other activities too, but the cultural activities were very, very important. Now, the other very vivid...
So you were quite sorry when good players left you in order to to leave because it brought about the...
Well, I wouldn't say sorry. We had some ambivalent feeling about it, you know. I mean, on one hand, we tried to help people to get out, even if they were first-class musicians and members of the Kulturbund Orchestra, you know. On the other hand, of course, we were in a dilemma, so to speak. One of the things which I'll never forget, and Frankfurt had a very big hall called Saalbau, if I remember, and in order...
Saalbau.
Saalbau, S-W-E, Saalbau, which had a capacity of over 1,000 people, and I remember there were from time to time big Jewish meetings there, of course with the approval of the Nazis, and the tenor of these meetings was always to encourage Jews to immigrate, which was important from the Jewish point of view because it was a kind of an alibi towards the Nazis, and the Nazis could see that the Jews wanted the same as the Nazis, that we encouraged the Jews to immigrate.
I mean, about which year are you speaking?
Well, this must have been in 1933, 1934, you know, about that time. And I remember one thing. We were in contact with a Jewish organization called the Hilfsverein der Juden in Deutschland, which was primarily responsible for helping in the technical arrangements for the immigration. And
from the Reichsvertretung?
Well, the Reichsvertretung only later on became a kind of a roof organization, but the know-how about immigration was always remained in the hand of the Hilfsverein. The Reichsvertretung was a kind of a roof organization, which had, it's like a government ministry, you know, the government, and within the Reichsvertretung were various departments, and the Hilfsverein, which was traditional, a very old organization, had the know-how in immigration. Also, particularly, they had very dynamic personalities. One name I remember was Wischnitzer. I think Wischnitzer was her name. Yes, I think so, because he also wrote a lot about Jewish statistics at this particular period. Anyway, I remember in one of these very big meetings, there was the framework was always, there was some musical function. Some musical function to give the whole thing a framework, because people wouldn't come just to hear a lecture.
In the Saalbau? In the
Saalbau, yes. And of course there was always some Gestapo, someone there who listened in, because the whole thing had to be quite officially. But one of the speakers was a very famous rabbi, Max Eschelbacher, who was a very great orator. And of course it was reviewed by representatives of the Hilfsverein, the opportunities for immigration, which were not unlimited, in the contrary, you know. People tried to get out, but they couldn't always get out. And one very classic example, which I never forget, was people asked, we wouldn't like to go somewhere as far away, and as you know, for example, people wanted to go to South America or somewhere encouraged to go to Australia. And Eschelbacher said, if in our days, where we are exposed to this situation, in terms of distance, there is no distance in the horizontal. There's only a distance in the vertical, you know? This was a classic thing, and it's good at that time these slogans were given out, because people, it was gradually demoralization setting in, and these slogans sustained people. Like a bit before, of course, on the 1st of April 1933, Robert Welch's famous article, "Tragt ihn mit Stolz den gelben Fleck," had an impact which cannot be overestimated. In a time when suddenly the impact of all the acute aggression against the Jews took place, people were arrested day and night. Suddenly he was writing in his paper, "Tragt ihn mit Stolz den gelben Fleck," be proud of be Jews.
Excuse me, you're speaking about the Jüdische Rundschau.
Yes, yes, yes.
But the Jüdische Rundschau wasn't very popular among the CV people.
You are referring to the time before 33. I'm talking now after 33.
After 33, Jüdische Rundschau was popular in Europe circles, in Frankfurt, let us say.
My dear friend, 1933, everything which helped to keep up the Jewish morale was popular. For all practical purposes, there were no distinction. In fact, the Zentralverein had also a paper called CV-Zeitung, which was full of news about Palestine. So all these distinctions had disappeared. If they existed before, the 30th of January 1933 had gleichgeschaltet the Jewish papers. They had only one tenor, and no Jewish paper in Germany could exist, as long as they did exist, after 33, unless they were always encouraging Jews to immigrate. And of course, Palestine was the the best possible goal to go to, in addition to other countries. But there was no ideological differentiation anymore after the 30th of January 1933. People would have tried to do it. The least would happen is the paper would have been closed and probably the people would have been arrested. Let me catch my...
When we're talking about ideology, I really want to ask you a question regarding your ideology in CV. Before 1933, let us say during the whole Weimar period, there was a certain kind of ideology in the non-Zionist circles in Germany of symbiosis between Germantum and Jewry and Judaism. It means it could be a symbiosis. How long did you continue with this kind of ideology after the establishment of the Nazi regime in Germany, if you did it all?
Look,
is my question clear?
Sure, sure. Look, to start with, it is, of course, fair enough to say that the Zentralverein, which was a very old organization, I don't know exactly when it was founded anymore, but the original purpose was... Here's a copy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The original purpose was to help in the integration between Jews and Germany, you know, in terms of what one called assimilation, or in a positive sense, you know.
Yes, yes.
However...
when was the CV established?
Well, it was towards the end of the 19th century, around 1800 something. I wasn't too familiar with the... I'm not too familiar with the historical side of it. I think you pull it out. No, pull it out, I think. Yes.
Okay.
But let me tell you this. In the first place, there was a development between the original purposes, and over these decades, what went on, and what was the opinion of other people, which joined them, because at any time the Zentralverein's very important platform was a fight against anti-Semitism in every way, political and otherwise, and also legally. And over the years, as the pressure increased, the question of fighting anti-Semitism was a matter which was accepted by many people, irrespective of the ideology. See, I would say that at the, what I may call now in retrospective, the good old times, when we had, for example, in the Preußischen Landesverband Jüdischer Gemeinden, which was a kind of a parliament, the Prussian Jews in Prussia, discussions between Zionist and non-Zionist, allocation of funds and this kind of things. Over the years, for all practical day-to-day purposes, there was some degree of cooperation between Zionist, non-Zionist organizations, and the overt fight which at times broke out about some very prominent leader who, like Kurt Blumenfeld and Alfred Klee on the Zionist side, and Ludwig Holländer and others on the Salvador side, they gradually disappeared, or I wouldn't say they disappeared, they were not to that extent within the Zentralverein of prominence as the need to fight anti-Semitism, which was in the interest of everybody, Jews and non-Jews alike. For one...
It became less important.
Yes, because anti-Semitism was gradually rising. Particularly, don't forget this, Hitler came to power on the wave of depression. See, after around 29-30, like everywhere in the world, there was a depression also in Germany. You know, with unemployment and all this, which meant enormous rise of anti-Semitism. And these things were very, very closely linked. And I would think this distinction disappeared gradually. And as far as, for example, my own connection with Zentralverein was concerned, it was the people there who were responsible, the younger generation, and there was a man who also died, Dr. Alfred Hirschberg, who was the editor of the CV Zeitung. There are wonderful types, and Ludwig Thies, Hans Reichmann, or Eva Reichmann, who also has written here. They were wonderful people, and they meant a lot to me on the personal side. They were my Jewish, they helped me develop my Jewishness, and in a way, I would say, Zionism in a way was almost too narrow. It was, being Jewish was more comprehensive, as of course at that time a lot of the so-called Zionist and non-Zionist activities had to do with a lot of infighting, you know. But by and large, I would think the whole ideology of the Zentralverein was watered down already before Hitler. There's no doubt about it. Because the main purpose to issue very prominent material against, for example, what I mentioned to you, that the archive against the Nazis, you know, which was for the benefit of everybody, every Jew in Germany, and for that matter some of the political parties too, who were interested to fight anti-Semitism, you know. So I was not directly concerned with this. My fight in this direction was only with my parents. My father was an ardent anti-Zionist, and I wasn't there discussing it with him at length, you know.
He was an ardent anti-Semite.
My father, yes. But look, he was a soldier in the First World War, and anyway.
Let me ask you a personal question.
Yeah?
When really Deutschtum became not be important for you?
Well, it has never. Look, all depends what you describe as Deutschtum. I think I'm part and parcel of the German or Central European culture. I was brought up there, I went to school this, and it's still up to me today. If at any place it would be more known to me than here in Israel, where people say I'm a Yek, and I'm very proud of being a Yek.
Yes, why not?
No, really. In fact, it comes up in many directions, particularly if you talk to people from other countries. German culture is part of my upbringing, you know. But I have no reason to say I'm particularly proud of it. But what I am today, I am because I was brought up educated this, you know. If I would have been born in Poland or in America, I mean, it's a different day and night, you know. See, for example, at this really great event, this world gathering of the Holocaust survivors, there again you could see really the forces which sustained Jews were conditioned by the fact in what culture, what frameworks they grew up and all this. So it's no problem for me. The other question is my relation to German Deutschtum today. That's a very, very, very clear issue. But to give you an example, we in a few days we want to go on holidays, and we are always trying the impossible to find a place where not too many Germans are, because we hate hearing too much German, you know. Or it goes even so far. We have here the visit of a very, very, very decent German who lived during the war in Germany, and who told us that he comes from Beckum in Westfalen.
From where?
Beckum in Westfalen, and who told us when he was 13 and the Jews were deported from Beckum that he was 13 and his father showed him this and said never to forget it. And when he came back after the war, he made his resolve to restore the name, the good name of the Jews in Beckum, so much so that he collected money in remembrance of the Jews from Beckum who were killed by the Nazis. Now, this man who came here visited us here, and we showed him around. He invited us to come to Germany. And we said to him, my dear friend, you are a nice guy and we appreciate what you are doing, but we will not put our foot into Germany. So I have nothing to do with him.
Look, my question was, when really you felt in the CV, not you personally, when did you feel in the CV that something changed regarding the ideology that it's possible to be a German Jew and as a human being? As a German Jew, you couldn't